Last week, I collapsed on my kitchen floor and called my son for help. He told me, "It's Katie's birthday. I'll try tomorrow." And that was the moment I stopped being his mother. I could forgive him, but I didn't want to. The pain began around noon, just a strange pressure in my chest that wouldn't go away. I kept folding laundry. Socks, old towels, his t-shirts he never came back to collect. I smoothed the edges like I used to when he was little. It felt ridiculous, but I did it anyway. Habits don't die, even when love does. By the time the sun dipped, the pressure had become heavier. I thought maybe it was just the usual fatigue. I told myself I was fine. That's what you do when you're 65 and used to putting yourself second. But I wasn't fine. My hand drifted to my chest over and over. I didn't sit down. Instead, I made soup. Chicken with dill. His favorite. Not Katie's. She said it smelled old, but I still made it. I had meant to save a bowl for him. He said he'd stop by last week. Then the week before that. That bowl had been waiting a long time. And then the bowl I just filled slipped through my fingers. The soup spilled, the bowl shattered. I dropped with it. Cold tile hit my cheek. My arm wouldn't lift. My legs wouldn't work. I could still reach. My fingertips found the phone. I tapped his name. Mark. It rang. "Hey, Mom." His voice was bright. Too bright. I heard laughter, plates, background music. I heard celebration. "Mark," I managed. I think something's wrong." His tone changed, but only a little. "Mom, it's Katie's birthday. We literally just sat down. Can I call you tomorrow?" Those words sliced deeper than anything. I forced my voice steady. "I think I need an ambulance." A pause. He sounded irritated. "Are you being serious?" "Yes," I said. Then he said it. "Just call 911. That's what they're for." And he hung up. He hung up. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't say he was coming. He didn't say, "Are you alone?" Or "Do you need me?" He didn't ask anything. And I lay there, listening to that silence. The ambulance came. I don't remember if I called or if the phone redialed itself, but someone showed up. I was lifted onto a stretcher, wheeled into fluorescent light. Nurses moved fast. Machines beeped. I was asked questions, date of birth, allergies, medications. And I answered. Alone. No one walked in behind me. No son. No visitor. No family. Later, the nurse gently fixed my fore. "Is someone coming?" she asked. I shook my head. I thought about the way he said Katie's birthday like it was sacred. Like that day, that dinner, that cake meant more than the woman who'd raised him. I thought about how fast he dismissed my voice. How practiced it was, his refusal. Not angry. Just easy. He didn't ask which hospital. Didn't ask what I needed. Didn't say, "Hang in there." He didn't say anything that showed care. Just, "Call 911. I used to cancel work to sit beside him with a fever. I used to bring his homework to school when he forgot it. When he crashed his first car, I took the blame for letting him borrow it. When his rent was late, I paid it. When his fridge was empty, I stocked it. I was there. I thought about the time he called crying when Katie was threatening to leave. I stayed on the phone, listened to his fears. I reassured him. I didn't hang up. I didn't say, "I'm busy." He told me, "I'll try tomorrow." I wanted to scream. But the machines were quiet, and so was I. My anger didn't come loud. It came slow, cold, deep. I remembered every birthday I planned for him, every Halloween costume I made, every time I skipped meals to make sure he had what he needed. I remembered how I celebrated every one of his successes and how I protected him from every one of his failures. When Katie lost her job, I covered their bills. When they fought, I consoled them both. I never got a thank you. I didn't ask for one. I just hoped that one day he'd show up when it counted. And when it did, he didn't. He picked dinner over me. He picked laughter over my pain. He picked a cake over a crisis. Resentment doesn't roar. It builds. It notes every word. Mom, it's Katie's birthday. So? I was your mother before she ever met you. We literally just sat down. So? I was lying on the floor. Can I call you tomorrow? No. Tomorrow won't save me. Are you serious? Do you think I would call you if I wasn't? Call 911. That's what they're for. And what are you for, Mark? He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't even offer to call back later. He just left me there. A burden. An interruption. And maybe that's what I'd always been to him. Not a person. Not a mother. Just the woman who filled in the cracks, cleaned up the mess, and kept things from falling apart. I stayed awake in that bed all night, watching the hallway, watching the clock. He didn't come. Not even a message. He left me there like I was no one. And that's when I understood I had already been no one for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I just stared at the door. The door he would not walk through. And I decided if he ever did come, I would not let him in. Not anymore. He chose that dinner. He chose cake over crisis. He chose her over me. I had chosen him every day for 35 years. But not anymore. I chose myself. They say the second night is worse. The adrenaline wears off. The silence sinks in. The heart stabilizes, but the soul doesn't. I lay in that hospital bed, machines murmuring steadily beside me, and I thought of nothing except that call. Not the diagnosis. Not the nurse's soft voice. Just that phone call. The way he said, "Can I call you tomorrow?" echoed louder than the EKG beeps. It repeated in my mind like a cruel lullaby. Every word wrapped itself around my chest tighter than any wire. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but I couldn't, because I wasn't just hurt. I was erased. When I opened my eyes again, the room was still dark. No visitor's chair pulled close. No flowers on the tray. No warm face leaning in to say, "I'm here." Just me. Just this air-conditioned emptiness. I pressed the nurse call button. Not for help. Just to remind myself someone could still respond when I reached out. She came in, quiet shoes on cold linoleum. "Do you need anything, sweetheart?" I almost asked her to sit with me. Instead, I said, "No, thank you," and turned my head away. Because even kindness felt sharp now. Like a reminder of what I wasn't getting from the person I wanted it from most. I stared at the whiteboard across from the bed. My name in dry erase marker. The date. A smiley face drawn by someone trying to cheer up strangers. I looked at it until the marker bled in my vision. "I'll try tomorrow." I used to believe he meant well. Even when he forgot birthdays, when he didn't call for weeks. Even when he showed up late and left early. I always told myself he means well. But there's a point where meaning well stops meaning anything. I counted everything in that moment. Every missed visit. Every time he said, "We're just so busy." Every time he called only when he needed something. The time he didn't tell me they'd moved. I found out from a neighbor. The time he borrowed money and never mentioned it again. The time Katie rolled her eyes when I brought over a casserole and said, "We don't really do those kinds of meals." And he didn't defend me. He just laughed. Awkward, soft, guilty. But he still laughed. The time he asked me to dog sit while they went on vacation, and when I said I had a doctor's appointment, he said, "Can't you reschedule?" It's just a checkup, right? All of it. Tiny cuts. Forgotten moments. And now one deep wound that split it all open. When morning finally came, the room didn't feel brighter. It just looked more honest. Bare. Unforgiving. The doctor came in with a clipboard. "You had an episode of atrial fibrillation. It's manageable. You'll need to rest and reduce stress." I almost laughed. Rest. Reduce stress. As if I hadn't spent decades carrying stress that wasn't mine. Mark's failed ventures. Katie's complaints. Bills I shouldn't have paid. Responsibilities that weren't mine but became mine because I couldn't say no. He left the room with a kind smile. He didn't know that his words, though gentle, only echoed what I already feared. This isn't the last time something like this could happen. And next time, I won't be calling him. A volunteer brought around a cart of newspapers and books. I asked for a pen and paper instead. Not for journaling. For planning. I wasn't going to let this moment fade into just another disappointment. I needed to make it mean something. The first thing I wrote, call the lawyer. The second, review accounts and automatic payments. And third, talk to the nurses about visitation rules. Because I didn't want him here, not after the fact, not with flowers and guilt and hollow words. Not when the worst had already passed. Not when his absence had spoken louder than anything his voice could offer now. I imagined the scene if he did show up. He'd say, "Mom, you should have told me it was serious." As if I hadn't. He'd say, "We were just in the middle of dinner." As if birthdays can't be paused. As if heart attacks wait. He'd say, "You know I care." As if caring looks like walking away. He would hug me. Too tight. Too late. And I would have to sit there pretending to be grateful. No. I wouldn't do that again. So I called the nurse over and asked her to write something in my file. No visitors unless I say so, I told her. Especially not my son. She didn't flinch. Just nodded. I understand. I wanted to say more. To explain. But what is there to say that doesn't sound like a lifetime of excuses? I just nodded back. After she left, I stared out the window. The parking lot below shimmered with morning light. People walked in and out. Lives moved on. But inside me, something had frozen. Not broken. Just stopped. I stopped trying to understand him. I stopped making excuses. And with every minute, I felt a strange clarity settle in. Like my life had been covered in fog for years, and now it was lifting. He had shown me exactly who he was. Not in one big moment, but in dozens of tiny ones. Moments I'd brushed off, laughed away, covered up. But now they were all in focus. And they hurt. Every last one. The time he asked why I didn't move into a smaller place. It's too much space for one person. Translation. Sell it so I don't have to worry about it. The time he rolled his eyes when I asked him to help me move furniture. Mom, just hire someone. Translation. You're too much work. The time Katie suggested putting me in a retirement community and he didn't say no. Translation. We've talked about it. Every little thing, now lit up in my memory like signs I had ignored. By the afternoon, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to explain. I was going to act. Quietly. Decisively. No dramatics. No announcements. Just changes. The lawyer answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Decker," he said, "how are you feeling?" I said, "Better now." He didn't question the tone. Just asked how he could help. "I need to update my will," I said. "Of course. Do you want to schedule an appointment?" "No," I said. "I want to remove a name. And cancel the trust distributions. Effective immediately." He paused, as if waiting for an explanation. But he didn't ask. And I didn't offer one. The call ended quickly. Professionally. With paperwork set to be delivered by the end of the week. I stared at my phone screen after he hung up. One name stared back at me in the call log. Mark. I didn't delete it. I didn't block it. I just turned the phone face down. The rest of the day passed slowly. The machines beeped. Nurses checked in. A tray of food came and went. I wasn't hungry, but I was awake. More awake than I'd been in years. When the nurse came to check on me one last time before her shift ended, she smiled and said, "Anything else I can do for you?" I looked at her, a stranger who had offered more comfort than my own son. And I said, "No. Thank you. You've done enough." I meant it. It didn't happen with shouting. No slammed doors. No speeches. Just silence. A quiet morning, soft sunlight pressing through the blinds. I had been discharged from the hospital the day before. The cab driver helped me carry my overnight bag up the steps. I thanked him, unlocked the door, and stepped into my house as if I were a guest. Everything was as I had left it, the broken bowl still in pieces on the kitchen floor, a dried puddle of soup beneath the table. I stared at it for a long time, not in shock, not even in sadness, just recognition. That was the moment. That mess on the floor. It felt like a mirror. All the years of cleaning up after others after him. That's how it always was. He made the mess. I cleaned it. Without thanks. Without pause. Not anymore. I knelt, wiped the floor slowly, and placed each piece of the broken bowl in a trash bag. Then I stood up, straightened my back, washed my hands, put on the kettle, and opened my laptop. The list I'd written in the hospital now sat beside me. I read it again. Call lawyer, done. Stop automatic payments, in progress. Block access to joint accounts today. Remove spare key from front porch now. It was a quiet kind of revenge. Not fueled by rage, but by something steadier, the decision to stop offering pieces of myself to people who only noticed when I was missing. I logged into my banking app. Each tab I closed felt like releasing a chain. The fund paused. Rent transfer canceled. Emergency savings draw terminated. His name vanished from every record. I opened the drawer by the door. Found the spare key he used to let himself in without knocking. It had his old house key still attached, from a place they'd moved out of 3 years ago. He hadn't updated it. Just assumed I'd always open the door. I put the key in a plastic bag, sealed it, placed it in a small envelope. No note. Just a label, returned to sender. The mailman would pick it up that afternoon. I sat at the table with my tea. Steam rising. The taste of chamomile warm and plain. The silence in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Then came the knock. I didn't flinch. I knew it would happen. He was always a day late. I stood up, walked to the window, peeked through the curtain. There he was. Mark. Holding flowers. A forced smile on his face. One he practiced for others, not me. He knocked again. I opened the door just enough to see him. Mom, he said, smiling too brightly. I came as soon as I could. Katie, she threw a surprise dinner, and you know how it is, I couldn't just. I didn't speak. He kept going. I brought you your favorite. White lilies. I remembered you liked those. I didn't take them. He hesitated. You look, okay, better. I was worried. Why didn't you text? I almost laughed. He had hung up when I was on the floor. He had said, call 911. That's what they're for. Now he wanted a text. I'm not taking visitors today, I said. He blinked. What? Mom, I came all the way over here. I didn't ask you to. He looked confused, then annoyed. You're being dramatic. That word. Dramatic. It's what he always used when I had needs. When I asked him to call more. Dramatic. When I asked for help moving a bookshelf. Dramatic. When I said Katie's comment at Thanksgiving hurt my feelings. Dramatic. No, I said. I'm being clear. He stepped back. So you're shutting me out now? I nodded. For now. Until I believe I matter more than your convenience. His mouth opened. Closed. Is this because of Katie's birthday? He asked. That's all he saw. A scheduling conflict. A misstep. Not the pattern. Not the years. Not the pain. He thought this was about one night. But it wasn't. And then, the twist came not from him, but from my memory. Something I hadn't let myself remember in a long time. His 5th birthday. The one I almost missed. I was working 3 jobs then. His father had just left. I hadn't bought the cake, hadn't wrapped the gifts. I was exhausted, ashamed. But I rushed into the store on my only break, bought what I could, and made it home just in time. Mark ran to the door, threw his arms around me. You came, he said. I knew you would. He didn't care about the gifts. Or the cake. Just that I showed up. And I had. Always. Even when I could barely stand. Now, Decades later, the roles reversed. He hadn't. And that hurt more than anything. I looked at him on the porch, flowers drooping, expression faltering. I could have yelled. I could have listed every disappointment, every time he left me waiting. But I chose silence. Not to punish him, but to protect myself. He held the flowers out again. I didn't reach for them. He placed them on the doormat and walked away. I closed the door, locked it, walked back to my tea. This time, it tasted better. Later that day, I called the nurse from the hospital. I need a follow-up appointment, I said. And I'd prefer to have the transportation voucher mailed directly to me. No contacts needed. She confirmed everything kindly. Before hanging up, she asked, "And your emergency contact? Do you want to keep your son listed?" I paused, then said no. "Please remove him." There was a silence. Then she said, "Understood." I ended the call. Then I stood in front of the living room shelf. The photos lined up in a row. Graduation, birthday parties, holidays. I picked up one frame. Mark at 5 years old, covered in frosting, smiling, safe. I put the photo in a drawer. Then another. Mark at 17, cap and gown. I was beside him, smiling, proud. That one went into the drawer too. Not in anger, in clarity. I needed a break from reminders, from memories that no longer matched the man who stood outside my door. By evening, he texted, "I hope you're okay. Katie says you need space, but I'm here when you're ready. Love you." I didn't reply, because love is not a sentence you send when it's convenient. It's what you show up with when someone is on the floor. And he hadn't. So I turned off the phone and let the silence keep me company. It was finally enough. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the silence that comes after a storm. Still air, closed doors, echoes you don't want to hear. Every room held a memory now, and some of them stung more than others. 3 days had passed since I turned him away at the door. He hadn't called again. I hadn't expected him to. That's how Mark handled discomfort. He avoided it. Let it drift like dust he assumed someone else would clean up. Me. It had always been me. On the 4th morning, the doorbell rang. Not once. 3 times in a row. I stood in the hallway, heart steady this time. I didn't rush. Didn't panic. Just looked through the peephole. "Katie." I opened the door a few inches. "Hi," she said, trying a smile. "Can we talk?" I didn't say no, but I didn't move. She stepped forward anyway. "It's gone too far," she said. "Mark's been a wreck." A wreck. I thought about being alone in a hospital room. I thought about dialing his number with shaking fingers. I thought about his voice, light and distracted, and the sentence he chose to say. "I'll try tomorrow." "He feels awful," she went on. He didn't understand how serious it was. I said nothing. "Look," she said, crossing her arms now, her tone shifting. "Families fight. You don't just cut people off over one bad moment." One moment? I remembered every favor, every bill I covered, every time I babysat so they could go on vacations I couldn't afford. I remembered when she rolled her eyes at the blanket I knit for their baby, whispered to Mark, "We'll replace it with something modern." And he had just nodded. I remembered cooking for them and her saying, "Oh, we don't really do homey food anymore." I remembered Mark laughing when I said I felt lonely sometimes. I remembered them inviting me to holidays and then asking me not to talk too much so I wouldn't overwhelm her family. I remembered how many times I swallowed my words to keep the peace. "Are you finished?" I asked her. She blinked. "Excuse me, you came here to defend him, not to listen." "I've done enough listening." She started to say something else, but I closed the door. Slowly, without force. No screaming, no anger, just a click. And that silence again. But this time it was mine. That afternoon, the calls started. First Mark, then Katie, then Mark again. Voicemails stacking up. Apologies mixed with excuses. Regret laced with blame. Mom, this is unfair. You're blowing this out of proportion. I've always done my best. Katie's crying now because of this. Katie's mother says you're acting unstable. She says this feels like emotional blackmail. She says maybe we need to set some boundaries with you. The next day, I received a long, angry voice message from Katie herself. You've humiliated Mark. He's been anxious for days. We've always supported you, and this is how you repay us, she snapped. You could have called me. But no, you'd rather play the victim and punish us like this. She kept going, voice rising, saying I'd embarrass them, that the neighbors were asking questions now. I don't care how sick you were, this isn't how families treat each other. That was the moment I deleted her number. Day 5, the messages turned sharper, angrier. If you keep this up, don't expect us to come around anymore. You're the one ruining this family now. I can't believe you're doing this over one stupid call. They sent texts filled with guilt trips. Dad would have been ashamed of how you're acting. You've made Katie cry every night. Do you want to die alone? But they never said, I'm sorry I didn't come. That was the sentence missing every time. On day 5, an email arrived. Subject, urgent, family matter. It was from Mark. He wrote that they couldn't understand why I was doing this. That I was creating problems. That I was destroying the balance. He said Katie was hurt. That his coworkers noticed he wasn't himself. That he missed our talks. He wrote, if you don't stop this, I don't know if we can keep trying with you. I closed the laptop. Because he didn't miss me. He missed the version of me that served him. That answered. That solved. They didn't understand because they never asked to. And suddenly I realized something. I wasn't just dealing with a bad week. I had spent years living in a house where my value was based on what I gave, not who I was. I was the one they called when the fridge broke, when the kids were sick, when money ran low. I was the backup plan, the afterthought, the default. And when I finally needed something, really needed it, I got a party. I got laughter in the background. I got call 911. The 6th day, I took a walk. Just around the block. The air was crisp. The wind gentle. I saw a neighbor, Mrs. Klein, watering her garden. She waved. I waved back. She walked over, dirt on her gloves, and smiled. How are you feeling? I heard you were in the hospital. I nodded. Better now. She touched my arm. You know, you're one of the kindest people on the street. Everyone says so. I didn't know what to say. So I said, thank you. Then she added, some people don't deserve your loyalty. It's okay to walk away. And that was when it hit me. I had been waiting for permission. From someone, anyone, to stop carrying people who wouldn't lift me in return. But I didn't need it. Not anymore. When I got home, I listened to one last voicemail. Mark's voice. Quiet. Tired. But no less passive. I miss you, Mom. But if you keep shutting us out, I don't know what else I can do. There it was again. What he could do. Not what he should have done. So I deleted the message. Then I deleted the others. Then I sat in my living room, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, and I breathed. Not because it was over, but because I had finally stopped hoping it would get better. I had let go. And in that empty, echoing hall of a house, I wasn't alone. I was free. And then I did something I didn't expect from myself. I smiled. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not out of spite. Not because I was afraid. But because I had finally accepted that I didn't want anyone walking into my home unless they respected what that home meant. For too long, I had allowed everyone to come and go freely, treating my space as if it was theirs to drop into whenever convenient. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They assumed. And I had allowed it. Until now. The locksmith was kind, didn't ask questions. As he tightened the new bolts, I looked at the pile of unused keys I'd gathered, spares handed out over the years to make their lives easier. I put them all in a plastic bag and tossed them in the trash. That afternoon, the letters started. Not handwritten. That would require effort. Typed. Cold. Formal. The first was from Katie. A printed message slid into my mailbox, likely meant to look calm and reasonable, but it was anything but. "We're deeply disappointed by your actions," it read. "It's important for our children to understand compassion and forgiveness, and your current choices send the wrong message. Mark has been deeply hurt. We hope you will reflect and reconsider." Not one word asking how I was feeling. Not one apology. Only accusations wrapped in polite language. Then came the texts again. Blocked numbers. Unfamiliar names. "Mark says you're still not talking to him. This is your granddaughter's godmother. You're tearing this family apart." They wanted me to feel shame. They wanted to pull me back into the same circle I had just stepped out of. And for a moment, I did question myself. Was I being too harsh? Was I punishing them unfairly? But then I remembered. Every word. Every laugh over the phone while I lay on the kitchen floor. Every moment they justified their comfort over my crisis. Every excuse that followed. The silence when I needed someone most. I remembered calling his name and hearing, "Can I call you tomorrow?" That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a choice. A week after the locks were changed, a nurse from the hospital called. She had just gotten off the phone with Mark. "He wanted to confirm your follow-up schedule," she said gently. I took a breath. "He's no longer authorized to receive my medical information. Please update my file." A pause. Then she replied, "Understood. Is there someone else you'd like to add?" "Yes," I said. "Me." I was finally my own emergency contact. That night, I walked into the spare room. The one I used to keep tidy in case Mark and Katie dropped by. The one that had fresh sheets and extra pillows, just in case they needed to stay over unexpectedly. I stood in the doorway and stared at it. Then I opened the window. Let in the air. The curtains fluttered like they hadn't in years. The next morning, I boxed up everything that didn't feel like mine. Photos, knickknacks, baby books they never came to pick up. I labeled the box and set it in the garage. I didn't throw it away, but I also didn't keep it close. I filled the room with things that were mine, books I hadn't read, plants I had meant to buy, a painting I'd once hidden because Katie said it clashed with the furniture, a scarf I knitted years ago that Mark never picked up, a small handmade card I once received from a neighbor's daughter that said, "Thank you for helping my mom." I turned the guest room into a writing room, a quiet place for me. I wrote lists. I wrote thoughts. I started to write stories. Not for anyone else. Just for me. For the first time in years, the space in my home matched the space I held in my own life. About 2 weeks after everything had settled, I received a card in the mail. No return address. No name inside. It read, "I saw you at the hospital that night. You were alone. I sat across from you in the waiting room. I didn't know what to say, but I recognized you. You were the woman who helped me when my mother was sick. You brought her a blanket. You told me I wasn't alone. You mattered to a stranger. I thought you should know." I read it twice. Then I folded it and tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. There was nothing to reply to. Nothing to return. Just truth. Sometimes the people we pour ourselves into aren't the ones who see us. But that doesn't mean we are invisible. It just means we gave too much to the wrong ones. The final message I ever got from Mark came a month later. It was short. "I don't know who you are anymore." I read it once, and then I smiled, because for the first time I did. I was someone who knew her own worth. Someone who stopped begging to be loved in return. Someone who didn't wait anymore. That night, I sat in my chair by the window, sipping tea, listening to the rain. The house didn't feel empty. It felt full of quiet things that mattered. Peace, space, light, and me. Just me. And that was enough. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. You don't have to deserve love. You don't have to earn your place. And if someone asks too much of you, you're allowed to walk away. I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.